Marcus Reed dropped to his knees in the parking lot, holding a cardboard box with everything he had left. 5 years of his life packed into something he could carry with one arm. Rain soaked through his ruined suit. His hands were still black with tire grease. 15 minutes ago, he had a career. 15 minutes ago, he had a future. Now, a security guard stood behind him, making sure he left the building. They fired him. Not for stealing, not for failing. They fired him for stopping to help a pregnant woman on the side of the highway. But here's the thing they didn't know. That woman owned the entire company. Comment the city you're watching from so I can see how far this story travels. And if this hits you the way I think it will, subscribe and follow this channel, because this story is just getting started. Marcus Reed woke up at 4:47 in the morning, 13 minutes before his alarm. He didn't move right away. He just lay there, staring at the ceiling, running through the presentation one more time in his head. Slide 1, Introduction. Slide 2, Regional Performance Numbers. Slide 3, his proposal for the new client retention strategy. Slide 4, the part where he would look every executive in that room in the eye and show them what 5 years of dedication looked like when it finally got its shot. He whispered the opening line to himself. Good morning. My name is Marcus Reed, and I've spent the last 5 years learning every corner of this company. Not from the top floor, but from the ground up. He said it again, slower this time. Then the alarm went off. Marcus reached over and silenced it before it could wake Ava. His daughter slept in the next room, and the walls in this apartment were thin enough that she could hear him sneeze from the kitchen. He sat up, swung his legs over the side of the bed, and pressed both palms into the mattress. Today was the day. 5 years of early mornings. 5 years of staying late when nobody asked him to. 5 years of doing two people's jobs for one person's paycheck. 5 years of watching other people get promoted over him and telling himself, your time is coming, Marcus. Just keep going. And now it was here. He walked into the bathroom, turned on the light, and looked at himself in the mirror. 41 years old. A little more gray at the temples than he wanted. Eyes that carried more weight than most people could see. But he was still standing. That counted for something. He reached for his razor and started shaving. Halfway through, he paused and looked at the small framed photo sitting on the edge of the sink. His wife, Denise, smiling. That photo was taken 3 months before the diagnosis, 6 months before the funeral, 7 months before Marcus found himself standing in a grocery store at midnight, holding a box of cereal in one hand and his 6-month-old daughter in the other, trying to figure out how he was supposed to do this alone. I'm still here, baby, he said quietly. I'm still going. He finished shaving, splashed water on his face, and got dressed. He had ironed his suit the night before, the charcoal gray one, the only one he owned that still fit properly. White shirt, blue tie. He checked himself once more and straightened the collar. Then he walked down the hall and pushed open Ava's door. She was curled up under her blanket, one arm wrapped around a stuffed bear that was missing an eye. 5 years old, already reading at a second-grade level. Already asking questions Marcus didn't always know how to answer. He knelt beside her bed. Ava, baby girl, time to get up. She stirred, one eye opened. Daddy, it's still dark. I know, but we gotta get moving. Mrs. Patterson is picking you up early today, remember? Ava groaned and pulled the blanket over her head. Marcus smiled. It was the kind of smile that came from somewhere deep, the kind that only parents understand. Come on now, I made you oatmeal. With brown sugar? Extra brown sugar. That got her moving. 20 minutes later, Ava was sitting at the kitchen table, eating her oatmeal, swinging her legs back and forth. Marcus sat across from her, reviewing his notes one last time, but he kept looking up at her instead. "Daddy, are you nervous?" He lowered the papers. "What makes you say that?" "You keep moving your lips, but nothing's coming out." He laughed, a real laugh, the kind that loosens something tight in his chest. "Yeah, baby, I'm a little nervous. I got a big thing at work today." "Like a test?" "Kind of like a test." She put her spoon down and looked at him with those big brown eyes. Denise's eyes. "You're gonna pass, Daddy. You're the smartest person I know." Marcus felt his throat tighten. He reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "Thank you, baby." "Can I tell you something?" "Always." "If they don't see how good you are, they're dumb." Marcus pressed his lips together and nodded. He didn't trust himself to speak for a second. "You know what, Ava? You're absolutely right." She grinned, picked up her spoon, and went back to her oatmeal, like she hadn't just given him the only pep talk that mattered. At 6:15, Mrs. Patterson knocked on the door. She was the retired teacher who lived 2 floors down, the one who watched Ava before school on days Marcus had to leave early. She was 72 years old and still sharper than most people half her age. "Morning, Marcus. Big day today, right?" "Yes, ma'am." She looked him up and down, then nodded with approval. "You look good. Sharp. Denise would be proud." That hit him in a place he didn't expect. He swallowed it down and handed her Ava's backpack. "Thank you, Mrs. Patterson. I'll be home by 6. Ava ran over and hugged his leg. "Good luck, Daddy." He bent down and kissed the top of her head. "I love you more than everything." "More than pizza?" "Way more than pizza." She giggled and took Mrs. Patterson's hand. Marcus watched them walk down the hallway. He stood there until they turned the corner. Then he grabbed his keys, his briefcase, and walked out the door. The drive from his apartment to the office was usually 40 minutes. He had budgeted an hour. That gave him 20 minutes of cushion. Enough time to set up the projector, run through the slides one last time, maybe grab a coffee and settle his nerves. He pulled onto the highway at 6:32. Traffic was light. Rain was coming down steady, but not heavy. His windshield wipers kept a clean rhythm. He had the radio on low, some talk station going through the morning news. He wasn't really listening. His mind was already in that conference room. He thought about what his supervisor, Tom Whitley, had told him 2 weeks ago. "Marcus, I'll be honest with you. I went to bat for you on this one. The partners weren't sure about giving you the presentation slot. I told them you were ready. Don't make me look bad." Marcus remembered the way Tom had said it. Not like a mentor encouraging a protege. More like a man placing a bet and warning the horse not to lose. But Marcus didn't argue. He just nodded and said, "I won't let you down." That was always his answer. For 5 years, that was always his answer. He gripped the steering wheel and took a breath. "Focus, Marcus. Today is your day. You have earned this. Nobody gave it to you. You earned it." At 7:03, the rain got heavier. Not just rain, a downpour. The kind that makes the highway feel like a river. Marcus slowed down, turned his wipers to high, and leaned forward slightly to see the road better. He was making good time. 40 minutes ahead of schedule. Everything was fine. And then he saw it. A car on the shoulder. Hazard lights blinking. The rear tire was completely flat, and the car was sitting at an angle that told him it had been there for a while. Marcus noticed it the way you notice most breakdowns on the highway. A quick glance, a brief thought, and then you keep driving. But then he saw her, a woman standing beside the car. She was holding her belly with one hand and her phone with the other. She was soaked. Her coat was too thin for this weather, and the way she was standing, leaning slightly to one side, shifting her weight, told Marcus something immediately. She was pregnant, and she was alone. He checked his mirror. Cars were passing. Nobody was slowing down. Not one single car. They saw her. He knew they saw her. But they kept going. Marcus looked at the clock on his dashboard. 7:05. He had time. He had plenty of time. But something deeper than the clock made him slow down. Something that had nothing to do with schedules or presentations or promotions. He thought about Denise, 8 months pregnant with Ava, coming home from the grocery store. The car broke down 2 blocks from the house. She sat there for 45 minutes before someone stopped. 45 minutes. In the summer heat, pregnant, alone. When she told him about it that night, Marcus felt something he rarely felt. He felt rage. Not at the car, not at the situation, at every single person who drove past his pregnant wife and didn't stop. What kind of people just keep going? He had asked. Denise had looked at him and said something he never forgot. The kind who thinks someone else will handle it. Marcus pulled over. He grabbed his jacket from the back seat and got out of the car. The rain hit him like a wall. In 5 seconds, his suit was soaked. In 10 seconds, it didn't matter anymore. He jogged over to her. "Ma'am, you all right?" She turned around. Her eyes were red. She had been crying, but the rain hid most of it. "I called for help. They said at least an hour. I'm supposed to be downtown for a meeting at 9, and I can't get anyone to—" Her voice broke. Marcus held up both hands. "Okay, it's okay. I'm going to help you. Do you have a spare tire?" She nodded. "In the trunk, but I've never changed a tire before." "That's all right. I have. Let me take a look." He walked to the back of her car, opened the trunk, and pulled out the spare and the jack. The lug nuts were rusted tight. The jack was the cheap kind that came standard, barely strong enough to hold the car. But Marcus had done this before, more times than he wanted to count. He took off his jacket and draped it over her shoulders. "Here, you're shaking." "You don't have to." "I know I don't have to. Take it." She took it. Her hands were trembling, and not just from the cold. Marcus got down on one knee, positioned the jack, and started working on the lug nuts. His dress shirt was plastered to his back. His tie was hanging heavy and wet against his chest. His hands, the same hands he had spent 20 minutes getting clean that morning, were now covered in road grime and grease. He didn't care. She stood beside him, holding his jacket around her shoulders, watching him work. "You're going to ruin your suit," she said. Marcus didn't look up. "It's just a suit." "It looks like an expensive one." "It's the only one I got." She went quiet. Marcus wrestled with the last lug nut. It wouldn't budge. He repositioned himself, planted both feet, and used every ounce of leverage he had. His knuckles scraped against the wheel well. He felt the skin tear, but he didn't stop. The nut broke free. He pulled the flat tire off, mounted the spare, tightened everything down, and lowered the jack. The whole thing took about 18 minutes, but in the rain, on his knees, with his fingers slipping on wet metal, it felt like an hour. He stood up, wiped his hands on his pants, which were already ruined, and turned to face her. "You're good to go. That spare will get you where you need to be, but don't go over 50. Get the real tire replaced as soon as you can." She stared at him. Not the way people look at strangers who help them. Something different, like she was trying to understand something. "What's your name?" she asked. "Marcus. Marcus Reed." "I'm Victoria. Victoria Grant." She extended her hand. It was still shaking. He shook it gently. "You take care of yourself, Victoria. And that baby." You have children? A daughter, 5 years old. Name's Ava. Victoria nodded slowly. She's lucky to have you. Marcus almost said something. Something about luck having nothing to do with it. Something about how being a father wasn't luck. It was a decision you made every single day, especially on the days when everything in the world was stacked against you. But he didn't. He just smiled. You get going now. You got a meeting to catch. She smiled back, a sad, grateful, complicated smile, and got in her car. Marcus watched her pull away. Then he looked down at himself. His suit was destroyed. His shoes were soaked through. His hands were bleeding from one knuckle, and there was grease on his face where he had wiped the rain out of his eyes. He walked back to his car and sat in the driver's seat. He looked at the clock. 7:26. He still had time. If he drove fast, if he hit no traffic, if every light was green, he could still make it. He pulled back onto the highway, but the rain didn't let up. It got worse. And at 7:41, traffic stopped. Completely. An accident up ahead. 2 lanes closed. Emergency vehicles blocking the right shoulder. Marcus sat in that traffic for 34 minutes. He watched the clock the way a man watches a wound bleed out. 7:50. 7:55. 8:02. 8:12. 8:20. He called the office. It rang 4 times before someone picked up. Whitfield and Partners, this is Rebecca. Rebecca, it's Marcus. Marcus Reed. I need to speak to Tom. Marcus, Tom's in the conference room. He said he's not taking calls right now. Rebecca, please. I need you to tell him I'm running late. There was an accident on the highway. I'm stuck in traffic. I'll be there as fast as I can. Just tell him I'm coming. There was a pause. Then Rebecca lowered her voice. Marcus, I'll try, but he's been in a mood all morning. Just get here. The line went dead. Marcus sat in traffic and did the only thing he could do. He waited. At 8:39, traffic started to move. Slowly at first, then faster. Marcus drove like his life depended on it. Because in a way, it did. He pulled into the office parking garage at 8:53. He ran. He didn't wait for the elevator. He took the stairs, 4 flights, in soaking wet shoes, carrying his briefcase in one hand and his laptop in the other. He reached the 4th floor at 8:58. He could see the conference room through the glass. People were already seated. Tom was standing at the front, arms crossed. 2 executives from corporate were there, people Marcus had never met in person before. Marcus pushed through the door at 9:01. Every head in the room turned. Tom Whitley looked at him, looked at the soaking wet suit, the grease on his hands, the sweat on his face, the tie hanging sideways. And Tom didn't say, "Are you okay?" He didn't say, "What happened?" He didn't say, "Glad you made it." Tom Whitley looked at Marcus Reed, a man who had given 5 years of flawless service, who had never been late, who had never missed a deadline, who had never once complained. And Tom said 3 words. "You're too late." Marcus stood in the doorway, chest heaving, water dripping from his sleeves onto the floor. "Tom, I can explain. There was a woman on the highway. She was pregnant. Her car broke down. I stopped to help her, and then there was an accident." Tom held up his hand. "Stop." The room was dead silent. "Marcus, I don't want to hear it. I told you what this meeting meant. I told you not to make me look bad. And you walked in here looking like you crawled out of a ditch." "Tom, I was helping someone." "I don't care." Those 3 words landed like a hammer. This is a professional environment, Marcus. We have standards. We have expectations. And I went out on a limb for you. Do you understand that? I put my reputation on the line. Marcus stood perfectly still. His jaw was tight. His hands were fists at his sides. But his voice was steady. "I understand that, Tom, and I appreciate the opportunity. But I'm asking you to hear me out. I was on time. I left early. I did everything right. A woman needed help, and I stopped. That's all." Tom looked at the two corporate executives. Then he looked back at Marcus. "Here's what I see. I see a man who couldn't prioritize. I see a man who had one shot and blew it. I see a man who clearly doesn't take this company seriously enough." Marcus felt something shift inside him. Something cold. Something final. "Are you firing me, Tom?" Tom didn't blink. "Effective immediately." The room didn't make a sound. One of the junior analysts looked down at the table. Another shifted in her seat. Nobody spoke. Nobody defended him. Nobody said, "That's not fair." Nobody said, "Wait." Nobody said anything. Marcus looked around the room, at the faces of people he had worked with for 5 years, people he had covered for when they were sick, people he had trained, people he had helped move furniture on weekends, people who had eaten the food he brought to office potlucks, people who called him reliable, solid, dependable. Not one of them opened their mouth. Marcus nodded slowly. "All right, then." He turned and walked out. He went to his desk. He stood there for a moment, just looking at it. 5 years of his life in a 6x6 cubicle. A coffee mug that said, "World's Best Daddy" in Ava's handwriting. A small cactus he had been keeping alive since his first week. A photo of Denise. And taped to the wall, a crayon drawing Ava had made in preschool. The drawing showed 2 stick figures, one big, one small, holding hands. And at the top, in shaky 5-year-old letters, it said, "My dad helps people." Marcus peeled the drawing off the wall. He folded it carefully and put it in his breast pocket, right over his heart. He packed the rest of his things in a box. It took 4 minutes. No one came to say goodbye. No one came to say they were sorry. No one came at all. He walked out of the building carrying 5 years in a cardboard box. The rain had stopped, but something inside Marcus hadn't. He put the box in his trunk. He sat behind the wheel, and for the first time in 5 years, Marcus Reed didn't know what to do next. He pulled out his phone and stared at it. He needed to call Mrs. Patterson and tell her he would be picking Ava up early. He needed to look at his bank account and figure out how many weeks he had before things got bad. He needed to update his resume, file for unemployment, start making calls. But instead, he just sat there. He reached into his pocket and pulled out Ava's drawing. "My dad helps people." He held it for a long time. Then Marcus Reed put the drawing on the dashboard, started the car, and drove home. He didn't cry. He didn't curse. He didn't scream. But somewhere between the parking garage and the highway, he asked a question that had no answer. When did helping someone become something you get punished for? Marcus pulled into the apartment parking lot at 10:14 in the morning on a Tuesday, and that fact alone felt wrong. He had never been home at 10:14 on a Tuesday, not once in 5 years. The parking lot looked different in the daytime. Emptier, quieter, like it belonged to someone else's life. He turned off the engine but didn't get out. His hands were still on the steering wheel. His knuckles were raw from the lug nuts. The grease had dried into the creases of his palms, dark lines that looked almost like they were drawn there on purpose. His suit was still damp. The fabric smelled like rain and asphalt and something else he couldn't name. Failure, maybe. Or maybe just the end of something he had spent 5 years building. He sat there for 11 minutes. He knew because he watched the clock. 10:14 became 10:17, became 10:22, became 10:25. Each minute passed like it was asking him a question he didn't want to answer. What now, Marcus? He finally reached for his phone and dialed. Mrs. Patterson picked up on the second ring. Marcus, everything okay? You never called this early. Yes, ma'am. Everything's fine. Something came up at work. I'm going to pick Ava up from school today. You don't need to get her. There was a pause. Mrs. Patterson had been a teacher for 38 years. She could hear a lie the way a doctor could hear a bad heartbeat. Marcus, what happened? Nothing happened, Mrs. Patterson. I just got the afternoon free. Another pause. Longer this time. All right, but you know where I am if you need me. Yes, ma'am. Thank you. He hung up and stared at the phone. Then he opened his banking app. He already knew the number, but he looked anyway. The way you look at a wound, even though you know it's going to hurt. $3,214. That was everything. Checking and savings combined. Rent was $1,200. Utilities were about $220. Ava's after-school program was $350 a month. Groceries. Gas. The minimum payment on the credit card he'd used to fix the transmission back in March. He did the math in his head. He had done this math before, many times, in the years after Denise died. But this time the math was different. This time there was no paycheck coming on Friday. 6 weeks. Maybe 7 if he cut everything to the bone. 7 weeks before the lights started going off. Marcus closed the app, put the phone in his pocket, and got out of the car. He carried the box up 4 flights of stairs because the elevator in his building had been broken since August, and the landlord kept saying, "Next week." He unlocked the door, walked inside, and set the box on the kitchen table. Then he stood in his own apartment in the middle of a Tuesday morning and felt like a stranger in his own life. He looked at the box. The coffee mug was on top. World's Best Daddy. Ava had painted it at a craft fair last summer. The letters were crooked. The handle had a small chip where Marcus had accidentally knocked it against his desk. He picked it up and held it. He thought about calling someone. His brother, maybe. Raymond lived in Baltimore, worked construction, had 3 kids of his own. But Raymond had a way of turning every conversation into advice Marcus didn't ask for. You should have just kept driving, man. That's what Raymond would say. Marcus could hear it already. He thought about calling his mother. But his mother was 76 years old and living on a fixed income in a small house in North Carolina. And the last thing she needed was another reason to worry about her son. So Marcus called no one. He took a shower. He stood under the water for a long time, watching the grease and grime swirl down the drain. He scrubbed his hands until the hot water ran out. When he got dressed, he put on jeans and a t-shirt, and the simple act of not wearing a suit in the middle of a workday made his chest feel hollow. He sat down at the kitchen table and opened his laptop. He pulled up his resume. The last time he had updated it was 5 years ago, the day before he got the job at Whitfield and Partners. 5 years of work, and now he had to figure out how to describe it on a single page. He stared at the blinking cursor for 20 minutes and didn't type a single word. At 2:45, he drove to Ava's school. He was early. He parked across the street and waited. Other parents started showing up around 3. Mostly mothers, a few fathers. Marcus watched them talk to each other, laugh about something, check their phones. Normal people living normal afternoons. He wondered how many of them were one bad Tuesday away from sitting where he was sitting. The bell rang at 3:15. Kids poured out of the building like water from a broken pipe. Marcus spotted Ava immediately. She was walking with another girl, talking with her hands the way she always did when she was excited about something. She saw his car and her face lit up. She ran over and pulled open the passenger door. "Daddy, what are you doing here?" "Thought I'd surprise you." "But Mrs. Patterson always picks me up on Tuesdays." "Not today. Today, you get the VIP treatment." Ava climbed in and buckled her seatbelt. She looked at him carefully, the way she did sometimes. That look that was too old for her face. "You're wearing regular clothes." "Yeah." "You never wear regular clothes on a work day." Marcus pulled away from the curb. "I got done early." "How come?" "Just one of those days." Ava accepted this, the way 5-year-olds accept most things adults tell them. Not because she believed it, but because she trusted him enough not to push. They drove home. Marcus made her a snack, apple slices and peanut butter. He sat across from her at the kitchen table and helped her with her homework, which was a worksheet about counting by fives. 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, Ava said, tapping each number with her pencil. "This is easy, Daddy." "Then you don't need my help." "I still want you here, though." Marcus looked at her. 5 years old and already saying things that could break a grown man. "I'm here, baby. I'm not going anywhere." That night, after Ava went to bed, Marcus sat at the kitchen table in the dark. He didn't turn on the light. He didn't open the laptop. He just sat there with his thoughts, and his thoughts were not kind. 5 years. 5 years of saying, "Yes, sir," and staying late, and picking up extra work, and smiling when he didn't feel like smiling. 5 years of being the first one in and the last one out. 5 years of watching men with half his talent and twice his confidence get promoted because they played golf with the right people, or went to the right schools, or had the right last names. And what did he get for it? 1 minute late. 9:01 on the dot. And Tom Whitley didn't even let him finish a sentence. Marcus replayed the moment in his head. The conference room. The silence. Tom's face. Those 3 words. "You're too late." But it wasn't the 3 words that kept him up. It was what came after. It was the room full of people who said nothing. 12 people in that room. 12 colleagues. Some of them had been to his apartment for dinner. One of them had borrowed money from him 2 years ago and never paid it back. Another one had cried in his car after her divorce, and Marcus sat with her for an hour in the parking lot and didn't say a word to anyone about it. 12 people, and not one of them stood up. That was the part that hurt, not the firing, the silence. Marcus sat in that dark kitchen until midnight. Then he went to bed and stared at the ceiling until sleep came for him, like a reluctant guest. The next morning, he was up at 4:47 again. Same time, same ceiling. Except now there was no alarm to set, and no suit to iron, and no presentation to rehearse. He got up anyway, made coffee, sat at the table, opened the laptop. He spent the morning applying for jobs. He applied to 14 positions before lunch. Account managers, project coordinators, administrative roles, things below his experience level, things that paid less than what he had been making. It didn't matter. He needed something. Anything. At 11:30, his phone rang. He didn't recognize the number. He almost let it go to voicemail. But something. Instinct, desperation, maybe just the need to hear a voice that wasn't his own, made him answer. "Hello? Good morning. Am I speaking with Marcus Reed?" The voice was professional, female, calm, not a recruiter's voice. Something more formal than that. "This is Marcus." Mr. Reed, my name is Catherine Powell. I'm the executive assistant to the director of the Grant Foundation. I'm calling to invite you to an interview. Marcus frowned. I'm sorry, the Grant Foundation? I don't think I applied there. You didn't, Mr. Reed. You were recommended. Recommended? By who? I'm not at liberty to say at this time, but the director has personally requested a meeting with you. Would you be available tomorrow morning at 9? Marcus almost laughed. Not because it was funny, because it was absurd. Yesterday he got fired. Today he was getting a personal invitation to interview at a foundation he had never heard of. Can I ask what the position is? The director will discuss the details with you in person. I can tell you it's a senior leadership role. The compensation is competitive, and Mr. Reed, the director was very specific that it had to be you. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Mr. Reed, are you still there? Yeah, I'm here. I'll be there. 9 o'clock. Wonderful. I'll send the address to this number. Please bring a copy of your resume and any references you'd like to share. And Mr. Reed? Yes? Don't be late. The line went dead. Marcus lowered the phone and stared at it. He read the text that came through a minute later. An address downtown. A building he didn't recognize. A suite on the 22nd floor. He sat back in his chair and ran both hands over his face. Something about this didn't add up. Nobody calls you the day after you get fired and offers you a senior leadership interview. Nobody says the director personally requested you and then won't tell you who recommended you. That's not how the world works. At least, that's not how Marcus's world had ever worked. He thought about ignoring it. He thought about calling back and asking more questions. He thought about telling Catherine Powell that he didn't have time for games or scams or whatever this was. But then he thought about $3,214. He thought about Ava's school trip that needed to be paid for by the end of the month. He thought about the heater that rattled every time it turned on, and the landlord who kept saying, "Next week." He thought about 7 weeks. Marcus picked up the phone and called the only person he could think of. Mrs. Patterson answered on the first ring. Morning, Marcus. Mrs. Patterson, can I ask you a favor? You don't even have to ask. Can you take Ava to school tomorrow and pick her up? I've got an interview. There was a beat of silence. Then Mrs. Patterson's voice came back, warmer than before. Marcus Anthony Reed, you just tell me what time. I need to leave by 7:30. I'll be there at 7:15. Thank you, Mrs. Patterson. You listen to me. Whatever happened at that company, it's their loss. You hear me? Their loss. Now go iron whatever you got left and walk in there tomorrow like you own the building. Marcus smiled. A small one, but real. Yes, ma'am. He hung up and went to his closet. The charcoal suit was ruined. The only other option was a navy blazer that was slightly too tight in the shoulders and a pair of khakis that still had the crease from the last time he wore them to church. Not ideal, but it would have to do. He ironed everything, twice. He polished his shoes, a different pair, the brown ones, because the black ones were still wet from yesterday. He laid everything out on the bed like a uniform. Then he picked up Ava from school, made dinner, helped her with homework, read her a story, and put her to bed. At the door to her room, she stopped him. Daddy? Yeah, baby. Are you okay? You've been quiet. Marcus leaned against the doorframe. I'm okay. Just thinking. About what? About how lucky I am to have you. Ava tilted her head. You always say that when something's wrong. 5 years old. Already reading him better than anyone alive. Ava, I promise you, everything is going to be all right. You promise? I promise. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she nodded. "Okay, Daddy." "Good night, baby girl." "Good night." He closed her door and stood in the hallway for a full minute, pressing his back against the wall. Everything is going to be all right. He had said those exact words to Denise 6 years ago in a hospital room, 3 weeks before she died. He had said them knowing they might not be true. He had said them because sometimes that's all a man can do. Say the words and then fight like hell to make them real. Marcus went to the kitchen table, sat down, and pulled up everything he could find about the Grant Foundation. There wasn't much. A website that was simple and professional. A mission statement about ethical business practices and community-based leadership development. A few press releases about grants given to organizations in underserved neighborhoods. No photos of the director, no name listed on the leadership page. Just a logo and the words, "Character is the only credential that matters." Marcus read that sentence 3 times. Then he closed the laptop, set his alarm for 4:30, and went to bed. He didn't sleep well. He dreamed about the highway, about the rain, about Victoria Grant standing beside her car, soaking wet, holding her belly. In the dream, she looked at him and said something he couldn't hear. He kept asking her to repeat it, but the rain was too loud. He woke up at 4:27, 3 minutes before the alarm. He got up, showered, shaved, and put on the navy blazer and khakis. He looked at himself in the mirror. It wasn't the charcoal suit. It wasn't perfect. But it was clean, and it was pressed, and it was the best he had. He touched Denise's photo on the sink. "Wish me luck, baby." Mrs. Patterson arrived at 7:15 on the dot. She had brought muffins. "Blueberry," she said, handing him one. "Brain food. Now go." Marcus hugged her, kissed Ava goodbye, and walked out the door. The drive downtown took 38 minutes. No rain, no traffic, no broken-down cars on the shoulder. The universe, it seemed, had decided to get out of his way for once. He parked in the garage 2 blocks from the building. He sat in the car for 5 minutes, eating the muffin, brushing the crumbs off his blazer, going over his resume in his head. He didn't know what this was. He didn't know who had recommended him, or why, or what kind of position required a personal request from a director he had never met. But he knew one thing: he was not going to be late. Marcus walked into the lobby of the Grant Foundation building at 8:41. He gave his name to the front desk. A woman in a dark suit escorted him to an elevator and pressed the button for the 22nd floor. The elevator was silent, clean, expensive. The kind of elevator that belonged in a building Marcus had never been invited into. The doors opened to a reception area with hardwood floors and tall windows. A woman stood up from behind a desk and smiled. "Mr. Reed, I'm Catherine Powell. We spoke on the phone. The director is ready for you. Please follow me." She led him down a hallway, past glass offices, past conference rooms with long tables and leather chairs, past framed photographs of community projects and ribbon cuttings. They stopped at a set of double doors. Catherine opened them. Marcus stepped inside. The boardroom was large. A long oak table ran down the center. At the far end, a chair was turned toward the window. Someone was sitting in it, but Marcus couldn't see who. Catherine nodded at him and closed the doors behind her. Marcus stood alone in the room, holding his resume in one hand and the last of his dignity in the other. The chair turned around, and Marcus stopped breathing. It was her. The woman from the highway. The woman standing in the rain, soaking wet, holding her belly with one hand and her phone with the other. The woman whose tire he changed on his knees in a ruined suit while the clock ticked away everything he had worked for. Victoria Grant. Except she didn't look like she had on that highway. She wasn't shaking. She wasn't crying. She wasn't standing in the rain, begging someone to stop. She was sitting at the head of a boardroom table in a building that had her name on it, wearing a black blazer over a white blouse, her hair pulled back, her hands folded in front of her, and her eyes locked on Marcus with a look that told him she had been waiting for this moment since the second he pulled over. Marcus didn't move. His feet were planted to the floor like the ground had reached up and grabbed him. His brain was running through every possible explanation and rejecting each one before it was fully formed. This didn't make sense. None of this made sense. "Please," Victoria said, "sit down." Her voice was different. On the highway, it had been thin, broken, panicked. Now it was steady, low. The voice of someone who was used to being the most powerful person in whatever room she walked into. Marcus didn't sit. Not yet. "You're the director," he said. It wasn't a question. Victoria tilted her head slightly. "I'm the founder, actually, and the CEO. Director is what we put on the website because I've found that people behave more honestly when they don't know exactly who they're talking to." Marcus looked at the chair, then back at her. "You knew who I was when you called me. I knew who you were the moment you pulled over. But you, on the highway, you said your name was Victoria. You said you had a meeting downtown. Both of those things were true. My name is Victoria Grant, and I did have a meeting downtown. Not the kind you imagined, but a meeting nonetheless." Marcus felt the resume in his hand start to crumple. He loosened his grip. "I don't understand what's happening right now." Victoria gestured to the chair across from her. "Sit down, Marcus, and I'll explain everything." He pulled the chair out. He sat. He placed the resume on the table. His hands were trembling, just barely, and he pressed them flat against the wood to make them stop. Victoria studied him for a long moment before she spoke. 3 months ago, I received an anonymous complaint from someone inside Whitfield and Partners. The complaint alleged a pattern of discriminatory management practices, wrongful terminations, and a leadership culture built on fear rather than performance. I was asked to investigate because my foundation funds several of Whitfield's community outreach programs. If the allegations were true, I needed to know. Marcus sat perfectly still. "I don't do investigations from a corner office, Marcus. I never have. You don't learn how a company truly operates by scheduling a visit and letting them put on a show. You learn by watching what people do when they don't know anyone's watching." She paused and let that settle. "So I decided to visit the company anonymously. I arranged a meeting with the executive team under a different name. I was supposed to arrive at 9 that morning, observe the culture firsthand, and make my assessment." Marcus felt something cold moving through his chest. Not anger. Not yet. Something closer to the feeling you get when a puzzle starts coming together, and you realize the picture is bigger than you thought. "But on the way there," Victoria continued, "I got a flat tire. And that was not part of the plan. That was real. The rain was real. The flat was real. My phone had 12% battery, and roadside assistance told me an hour. I was standing on the side of a highway, 6 months pregnant, and I was genuinely afraid." Her voice shifted, just slightly, just enough for Marcus to hear the woman from the highway underneath the CEO. "Cars kept passing. Dozens of them. I counted. I stopped counting at 30. Not one of them slowed down. Not one. And I thought to myself, this is it. This is the answer to my investigation. This is what the world looks like when people decide that someone else will handle it." She looked directly at him. "And then you stopped." Marcus swallowed hard. "You got out of your car in the pouring rain, in a suit that you clearly could not afford to ruin, and you walked toward me like it was the most natural thing in the world. You didn't hesitate. You didn't check your watch first. You didn't ask me if I could pay you. You took off your jacket and gave it to me. A stranger, on the side of a highway, in the rain. and you got down on your knees and changed my tire with your bare hands." Marcus's jaw tightened. He could feel the pressure building behind his eyes, but he held it. "I watched you, Marcus, the whole time. I watched the way you worked. I watched you tear your knuckle open and not even flinch. I watched you refuse to rush, even though I could tell you were watching the clock. And when you were done, you looked at me and said, 'You take care of yourself and that baby.' Like you weren't the one who had just sacrificed something. Like it was nothing." "It was the right thing to do," Marcus said quietly. "I know it was. That's exactly my point." Victoria reached below the table and pulled out a laptop. She opened it, turned it around, and slid it toward Marcus. On the screen was a video. Security camera footage from the Whitfield and Partners conference room. The timestamp read 9:01 a.m. Marcus watched himself push through the door, soaking wet, breathless. He watched Tom Whitley turn toward him. He watched the whole thing play out in silence. No audio in the footage, but he didn't need audio. He remembered every word. "I obtained this footage yesterday morning," Victoria said. "I have a legal team that can move fast when I need them to. I also obtained your personnel file, your performance reviews, and every internal communication that referenced your name over the past 5 years." Marcus looked up from the screen. "Do you want to know what I found?" He didn't answer. He didn't need to. 5 years of flawless performance reviews. Not a single disciplinary action. Not one late arrival. Not one missed deadline. 3 commendations from clients who specifically requested to work with you. A note from the HR director 2 years ago recommending you for a leadership development track. A recommendation that Tom Whitley personally rejected without telling you. Marcus felt something crack inside his chest. He rejected it? He never submitted it. I have the email. He told HR that you weren't ready and that he would revisit it next quarter. He never did. Marcus pressed his hands into the table. His knuckles went white. "There's more," Victoria said. "I interviewed 4 of your former colleagues yesterday afternoon. Off the record. Do you know what every single one of them told me?" Marcus shook his head. "They told me you were the best person in that office. Not the best employee. The best person. One woman, I believe her name was Sandra, she told me that you sat with her in a parking lot for an hour after she found out her husband was leaving her, and you never told a single soul. A man named David told me you lent him $1,500 when his mother was sick and never asked for it back. Another colleague said that when she was new and everyone ignored her, you were the only one who invited her to lunch." Marcus stared at the table. "And not one of them said a word when Tom Whitley fired you in front of the entire room." The silence that followed was heavy. The kind of silence that has weight. The kind that presses down on your shoulders and makes you feel every year of your life all at once. "Why didn't they?" Marcus asked. Not to Victoria. Not really to anyone. It was the question he had been asking himself in the dark kitchen at midnight. The question that had no answer. Victoria's voice was gentle now. Not soft, gentle. "There's a difference." "Because they were afraid, Marcus. The same way that every car on that highway was afraid. Afraid of being late. Afraid of getting involved. Afraid of losing something. Fear is the most powerful management tool in the world, and Tom Whitley knew how to use it." Marcus closed his eyes. "I need to tell you something," Victoria said, "and I need you to hear it clearly." He opened his eyes. "As of 8 o'clock this morning, Tom Whitley has been terminated from Whitfield and Partners, effective immediately. I personally called the board of directors last night and presented my findings. I showed them the footage, the personnel files, the pattern of suppressed recommendations, and the testimony of your colleagues. Tom Whitley was not just a bad manager, Marcus. He was a liability, and he had been one for a long time. The board agreed unanimously. Marcus sat back in his chair. He didn't know what to feel. Relief? Anger? Vindication? Grief? It was all there, swirling together, and none of it was clean. Tom's gone? Tom's gone. Marcus let out a breath he didn't know he had been holding. It came out shaky, uneven, like something that had been locked in a tight space for too long. "But I didn't bring you here to tell you about Tom," Victoria said. "I could have done that in a phone call. I brought you here because I want to talk about you." "Me?" "Marcus, what happened to you on that highway and in that conference room is not rare. It happens every day, in every city, in every company. Good people are punished for doing the right thing, and the people who punish them face no consequences. That is the world we live in, and I have spent the last 20 years of my life trying to change it." She folded her hands on the table. The Grant Foundation exists for one reason: to identify, protect, and elevate people of character. Not people with the best resumes, not people with the best connections. People who do the right thing when no one is watching and when there is a cost for doing it. Marcus looked at her, really looked at her. And for the first time since he walked into the room, he saw past the CEO, past the boardroom, past the power. He saw the woman on the highway, the one who was scared, the one who counted 30 cars and none of them stopped. "You pulled over, Marcus. That's the only credential I care about." Marcus's throat was tight. He pressed his lips together and nodded slowly. "I want to offer you a position," Victoria said. "Not at Whitfield and Partners. Here, at the Grant Foundation. We're launching a new department focused on ethical leadership development and workplace culture reform. I need someone to run it. Someone who understands, personally, what it means to be overlooked, undervalued, and punished for having integrity." She slid a folder across the table. "That's the offer. Take your time. Read it. But I want you to know something before you open it." Marcus rested his hand on the folder, but didn't open it. "This is not charity," she said. "I'm not offering you this because I feel sorry for you. I'm offering you this because you are exactly the person I've been looking for, and I would have searched for another year if I had to. What I saw on that highway was not an accident. It was a test that the universe put in front of both of us, and you were the only one who passed it." Marcus was quiet for a long time. The room held its breath. Then he spoke. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course." "On the highway, when I gave you my jacket, did you know then?" Victoria paused, a real pause, not a strategic one. "No, I didn't know anything about you. I didn't know your name. I didn't know where you worked. I didn't know about your daughter or your wife or your 5 years at Whitfield. I just knew that a man stopped when no one else would. And he did it like it cost him nothing, even though I could see in his face that it was costing him everything." Marcus felt his eyes burn. He blinked it away. "I found out who you were later," she continued, "after I arrived at Whitfield for my evaluation. I was in the lobby, and I overheard 2 employees talking about a man who had just been fired for showing up late. One of them said, 'He said he stopped to help some pregnant woman on the highway.' The other one laughed and said, 'That's the dumbest excuse I've ever heard.' And I stood there in that lobby, Marcus, still wearing your jacket, and I knew exactly who they were talking about." Marcus couldn't speak. "I had your jacket. I could still smell the rain on it. And these 2 people were laughing about the man who gave it to me." She shook her head slowly. "That's when I decided. Not just to fire Tom Whitley. Not just to report the findings to the board, but to find you, to offer you something real. Because if the world is going to punish men like you for being decent, then I am going to build a place where decency is the requirement. And I want you to help me build it." Marcus looked down at the folder under his hand. He could feel the thickness of it. Multiple pages. A real offer. Numbers and titles and benefits and all the things that, 48 hours ago, he thought he had lost forever. But he didn't open it. "Victoria?" "Yes?" "I appreciate this, more than I can put into words. But I need to be honest with you. Please. I'm not looking for a rescue. I've been doing this on my own for 5 years, raising my daughter, paying my bills, showing up every day. I didn't stop on that highway because I wanted something in return. I stopped because that's what you're supposed to do. If I take this job, it has to be because I've earned it, not because you owe me." Victoria smiled. Not a polite smile, a real one. The kind that reaches the eyes and stays there. "Marcus, I have hired hundreds of people in my career. Do you know how many of them have sat across from me and said, 'I need to earn this, not be given it'?" "How many?" "You're the first." Marcus looked at her. She looked at him. And something passed between them that didn't need words. An understanding, a mutual recognition. Two people who had learned the hard way that character is not rewarded by the systems it serves. Two people who had decided to keep showing up anyway. "Open the folder," Victoria said. Marcus opened it. He read the first page, then the second, then the third. His eyes moved slowly, carefully, the way a man reads something when he's afraid it might disappear if he goes too fast. The title was Director of Ethical Leadership and Culture. The salary was more than double what he had been making at Whitfield. Full benefits, tuition assistance for dependents, a flexible schedule built around the needs of working parents. And at the bottom of the last page, a handwritten note in blue ink. It read, "Character is the only credential that matters. Welcome home." Marcus closed the folder. He pressed both hands flat on top of it. "I have one condition," he said. "Name it." "I want to do this right. If I lead this department, we don't just make policies. We change how people are treated from the inside out. No more Tom Whitleys. No more rooms full of people who are too afraid to speak. No more punishing someone for doing the right thing. If I'm going to do this, it has to mean something." Victoria leaned forward. "That's not a condition, Marcus. That's the job description." Marcus held her gaze for a long time. And then, for the first time in 2 days, something loosened in his chest. Not all the way, not completely, but enough to let him breathe. "Then I'll take it." Victoria extended her hand across the table. Marcus shook it, the same hand that had been covered in grease and rain 48 hours ago. The same hand that had changed a tire for a stranger and packed 5 years into a cardboard box. The same hand that had held Ava's drawing against his chest like it was the only thing in the world that mattered. "When do I start?" he asked. "Monday, 8:30. "But Marcus?" "Yeah?" "If you see someone broken down on the highway on your way in, stop. That's an order." Marcus laughed. For the first time in 2 days, he laughed. And it was the kind of laugh that sounds like a man putting himself back together. He stood up, tucked the folder under his arm, and walked toward the door. He stopped with his hand on the handle and turned back. "Victoria?" "Yes?" "Thank you. Not for the job, for stopping to look back. Most people wouldn't have." Victoria placed her hand on her belly. The baby moved. She felt it, and her face softened into something private, something that belonged to the woman on the highway and not the CEO in the boardroom. Most people wouldn't have pulled over either, she said. But you did. Marcus nodded once and walked out of the boardroom. He rode the elevator down alone. 22 floors. He watched the numbers count down and felt each one in his chest. 22. 21. 20. All the way to 1. The doors opened. He stepped into the lobby. He walked through the front doors and into the daylight. He stood on the sidewalk, holding the folder, and pulled out his phone. He called Mrs. Patterson. She answered before the first ring was done. "Well, Mrs. Patterson, I got the job." She was quiet for exactly 1 second. Then she let out a sound that was half laugh, half prayer. "Oh, Marcus. Oh, thank the Lord. I told you they're lost, didn't I?" "Yes, ma'am, you did." "When do you start?" "Monday." "Then you better come home and tell that little girl of yours. She's been worried about you, Marcus. She don't say it, but she knows." Marcus pressed the phone against his ear and closed his eyes. "I'm on my way." He hung up, put the phone in his pocket, and stood on that sidewalk for 1 more minute. Just one. Just long enough to feel the sun on his face and remember what it felt like when things went right. Then Marcus Reed walked to his car, started the engine, and drove home to his daughter. Marcus pulled into the apartment parking lot at 12:17 in the afternoon, and for the second time that week, he was home in the middle of a day when he shouldn't have been. But this time was different. This time he wasn't carrying a cardboard box. He was carrying a folder with his name on it and a salary figure that he had read 4 times on the drive home because his brain refused to believe it. He sat in the car for a moment, not because he was afraid, because he needed to feel it, all of it. The weight of the last 48 hours pressing down on him, and then slowly lifting. Not all the way, not yet, but enough. He walked upstairs, 4 flights. The elevator was still broken. The landlord was still saying next week. But Marcus took those stairs 2 at a time, and when he reached his floor, he wasn't even breathing hard. Mrs. Patterson opened the door before he could get his key out. "Get in here," she said. "Tell me everything." Ava was sitting at the kitchen table with a coloring book. She looked up when Marcus walked in, and her face did that thing it always did, that flash of pure, unfiltered happiness that only children can produce. The kind that doesn't calculate, the kind that just is. "Daddy!" She jumped off the chair and ran to him. He scooped her up with one arm and held her against his chest. She wrapped her arms around his neck and squeezed so hard he could barely breathe. "You're home early again," she said into his shoulder. "I am. Is this going to be a thing now?" Marcus laughed. "No, baby, this is just a special day." He set her down and looked at Mrs. Patterson, who was standing by the counter with her arms crossed and her eyebrows raised, waiting. "I got the job," he said. Mrs. Patterson closed her eyes and pressed both hands together like she was praying. When she opened them, they were wet. "I knew it. I knew it the second you walked out that door this morning. I could feel it." "It's a good job, Mrs. Patterson. A real one. Better than what I had." "How much better?" Marcus told her the salary. Mrs. Patterson grabbed the counter. "Lord have mercy, Marcus." "I start Monday." She shook her head, not in disbelief, but in the way people shake their heads when the world finally does something right, and they don't quite know how to process it. "Your mother needs to hear this. You call her tonight, you hear me?" "Yes, ma'am." Ava was pulling on his hand. "Daddy, what job? What happened?" Marcus knelt down so he was eye level with her. "Remember how I told you I had a test at work?" "The big thing." "The big thing. Well, the first test didn't go so well. But I got a second chance, and this one went a lot better." "Did you pass?" "I passed, baby." Ava grinned so wide her eyes nearly disappeared.
I told you you're the smartest.
Mrs. Patterson dabbed her eyes with a dish towel and headed for the door. I'm going to leave you two alone. Marcus, you enjoy this. You earned it. Thank you, Mrs. Patterson, for everything. She stopped at the door and turned around. Marcus, can I say one more thing? Always. Denise is smiling right now. Wherever she is, she's smiling. Marcus felt his chest tighten. He nodded once, and Mrs. Patterson left. That afternoon, Marcus and Ava sat at the kitchen table and ate peanut butter sandwiches for lunch, and he let her have 2 juice boxes instead of 1 because it was a special day. She talked about school and her friend Maya and a caterpillar they found on the playground. Marcus listened to every word like it was the most important thing anyone had ever said to him. That evening, after Ava went to bed, Marcus called his mother. She picked up on the 3rd ring. Baby, what's wrong? Nothing's wrong, Mama. I got some news. Good news or bad news? Because my blood pressure can't handle bad news tonight, Marcus. Good news, Mama. He told her everything. The flat tire, the rain, the firing, Victoria Grant, the Grant Foundation, the new job, all of it. He told it slowly, the way you tell a story when every piece of it matters. His mother was quiet for a long time after he finished. Marcus. Yes, Mama? You stopped for that woman. Yes, ma'am. In the rain. Yes, ma'am. And they fired you for it. Yes, ma'am. Another silence. And then his mother said something that broke him open in a way he didn't expect. Your father would have stopped too. Marcus pressed the phone hard against his ear. His father had died when Marcus was 19. Heart attack on a job site. Construction worker. The kind of man who gave away his lunch if someone forgot theirs. The kind of man who stayed late to help the new guy. The kind of man who never made a lot of money, but never owed anyone an apology. I know he would have, Mama. Marcus, you listen to me. The world is going to keep testing you. That's what it does to men like you, men like your father. It tests and it tests and it tests, and it waits to see if you'll break. You didn't break, and I am so proud of you, I don't even have words for it. Marcus put his hand over his eyes and let out a breath that shook. Thank you, Mama. Now you go to bed. You got a big week coming up. Yes, ma'am.
And Marcus?
Yeah? Extra brown sugar in Ava's oatmeal tomorrow. She earned it, too. Marcus smiled through everything he was feeling. Good night, Mama. Good night, baby. He hung up and sat at the kitchen table in the dark for the 2nd night in a row. But this time it wasn't grief sitting across from him. It was something he hadn't felt in a long time. Something that felt dangerous to name, because naming it might make it disappear. Hope. Monday came faster than Marcus expected. He woke at 4:47, same time, same ceiling. But everything else was different. The navy blazer was pressed and hanging on the door. The brown shoes were polished. The folder from Victoria sat on the kitchen counter with a post-it note Ava had stuck on it that said, "Go, Daddy," in purple crayon. He got dressed. He made Ava's oatmeal. Extra brown sugar. He dropped her at Mrs. Patterson's, drove downtown, and walked into the Grant Foundation building at 8:15. 15 minutes early. Catherine Powell met him in the lobby with a badge, a laptop, and a smile.
Welcome aboard, Mr. Reed.
Marcus, please.
Welcome aboard, Marcus.
She walked him to his office. His own office. Not a cubicle, not a shared desk. An office with a door and a window and a nameplate that read, Marcus Reed, Director of Ethical Leadership and Culture. He stood in the doorway and didn't move for a full 10 seconds. Everything all right? Catherine asked. Yeah, just taking it in. Victoria wants to see you at 9. Conference room B. She has some things she wants to go over with you. I'll be there. Catherine left, and Marcus walked into his office and set his bag down. He placed Ava's "Go Daddy" post-it on the corner of his desk. Then he sat in his chair and looked out the window. He could see the highway from here. The same highway where he had changed a tire in the rain 3 days ago. He could almost see the exact spot. At 9 o'clock, he walked into conference room B. Victoria was already there, along with 2 other people he hadn't met. A man in his 50s with reading glasses pushed up on his forehead, and a woman about Marcus's age with a legal pad and a pen she clicked every few seconds. "Marcus, I'd like you to meet James Holloway, our Chief Operations Officer, and Renee Carver, head of our legal team." Marcus shook both their hands. "Sit down," Victoria said. "We have a lot to cover." She wasn't being unkind, but she wasn't being soft either. This was work Victoria, not highway Victoria. Marcus understood the difference immediately. "I told you the truth about why I brought you here," Victoria said. "But now I need to tell you what you're walking into. The Grant Foundation is 22 years old. We fund community programs, ethical business initiatives, and leadership development. But the new department you're heading, ethical leadership and workplace culture reform, that's never existed before. Not here, and frankly, not anywhere. You're building this from the ground up." "I understand." "Do you? Because I need to be clear about something. This isn't a feel-good project, Marcus. This isn't a poster on a wall that says, 'Integrity matters.' What I'm asking you to do is create a framework that changes how companies treat their employees. I want you to develop the training, the evaluation systems, and the accountability structures that make what happened to you at Whitfield impossible. Not difficult, impossible." Marcus felt the weight of that. "I'm going to give you resources," Victoria continued. "Budget, staff, access to our network of corporate partners. But I'm also going to hold you to a standard that most people would run from. I brought you here because of your character. Now I need to see your capability." James Holloway spoke for the first time. "I'll be honest, Marcus. When Victoria told me about this hire, I had questions. You don't have a background in organizational development. You don't have a graduate degree in leadership theory. On paper, you're an account manager." Marcus looked at him directly. "That's fair. But Victoria convinced me that the paper isn't the point. So I'm willing to give you the runway. But you need to produce results. This foundation runs on grants and donations, and our donors want impact, not intentions." "I understand, Mr. Holloway." James, I understand, and I'll deliver." Renee Carver clicked her pen. "Marcus, from a legal perspective, there's something you should know. The situation at Whitfield and Partners is escalating. After Victoria's report, the board opened an internal investigation. 3 additional employees have come forward with complaints about Tom Whitley. 2 of them are alleging racial discrimination." Marcus felt something tighten in his stomach. "We're not asking you to be involved in the Whitfield investigation," Renee said. "But you should know that your case may become part of a larger pattern. If it does, we may need your cooperation at some point." "Whatever you need," Marcus said. "I've got nothing to hide." Victoria nodded. "Good. That's what I expected you to say." The meeting lasted 2 hours. By the end of it, Marcus had a timeline, a budget proposal to draft, a list of 23 corporate partners to contact, and a mandate from Victoria that was both the biggest opportunity and the heaviest responsibility he had ever been handed. He walked back to his office and closed the door. He sat at his desk and opened the laptop. He stared at the blank screen for a moment. Then he started typing. He worked until 5:30. Then he stopped, packed up, and drove home. He picked up Ava from Mrs. Patterson's. They went home. He made dinner. Chicken and rice and broccoli that Ava pushed around her plate.
Eat the broccoli, Ava. Broccoli tastes like trees.
Trees are good for you.
Trees are for climbing, not for eating.
Marcus gave her the look, the dad look, the one that said, "This isn't a negotiation." She ate the broccoli. After dinner, after homework, after bath time and story time, Marcus sat on the edge of Ava's bed.
Daddy, do you like your new job?
I do. I like it a lot.
More than the old one?
Marcus thought about that. The old one taught me a lot, but the new one is where I'm supposed to be.
How do you know?
Because it feels right. Like when you put on shoes that actually fit. Ava scrunched her nose.
My shoes always fit.
That's because I make sure they do. She giggled and pulled the blanket up to her chin.
Daddy?
Yeah, baby?
The lady who gave you the job, the one whose tire you fixed.
Victoria.
Is she nice?
Marcus considered the question. She's fair, and she's strong, and she pays attention to who people really are, not just who they pretend to be. Like you. What do you mean, like me? You always say you can tell if someone's good by what they do when nobody's looking. Marcus stared at his 5-year-old daughter and felt, for perhaps the 100th time, that she understood things she had no business understanding yet. That's exactly right, baby. So she saw you when nobody was looking. Marcus's throat closed. He leaned forward and kissed her forehead. Good night, Ava.
Good night, Daddy.
He turned off her light and stood in the hallway, pressing his back against the wall the way he did every night. But this time he wasn't holding himself up. He was letting himself land. The first month was the hardest, not because the work was bad, because the work was new. Marcus had spent 5 years in a company that told him to follow instructions and keep his head down. Now he was being asked to create something, to think, to lead, and the gap between those two realities was wider than he expected. He made mistakes. He drafted a training module in his first week that Victoria sent back with more red ink than black. He presented a proposal to James Holloway that was enthusiastic but structurally incomplete, which was the nicest way anyone had ever told him to start over. He spent 3 hours on the phone with a corporate partner who politely informed him that they had no interest in a program built by someone with no credentials in the field. That one stung. He went home that night and sat at the kitchen table after Ava was asleep. And for the first time since starting the job, he felt the old doubt creeping back. The voice that whispered, "Who do you think you are?" The voice that sounded a lot like Tom Whitley. The voice that said, "You're an account manager playing dress-up in a director's office." He called his mother. "Mama, I don't know if I can do this." "Do what?" "This job. It's bigger than anything I've ever done. People with degrees and experience and resumes 10 pages long are doing this kind of work. And here I am, trying to figure it out at my kitchen table at 11 o'clock at night." His mother was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Marcus, what time did your father wake up every morning?" 4:30. "And what did he do?" "He went to work." "And did he have a degree?" "No." "Did he have fancy credentials?" "No." "Did he build things that are still standing?" Marcus closed his eyes. "Yes, ma'am." Your father built buildings with his hands, Marcus. Buildings that families live in. Buildings that are still standing 30 years later. He didn't need someone to tell him he was qualified. He just showed up and did the work. That's what Reed men do. We show up, and we do the work. Marcus pressed the phone against his forehead. Now stop feeling sorry for yourself and go to bed. You got a big day tomorrow. Yes, Mama. And Marcus? Yeah? The kitchen table is where your father figured out everything, too. There's nothing wrong with that table. He smiled. Good night, Mama. Good night, baby. Marcus hung up, closed his laptop, and went to bed. The next morning, he woke up at 4:47. He showered, shaved, and drove to work. He walked into his office, sat down, and started over. He rewrote the training module. He restructured the proposal. He called the corporate partner back and asked, not for their approval, but for their advice. He said, I'm new at this. I don't have the background you have. But I know what it feels like to be the person this program is designed to protect. Tell me what I'm missing. The partner was quiet for a long time. Then he said, No one's ever asked me that before. They talked for 90 minutes. By the end of the call, Marcus had 6 pages of notes and a partnership agreement that would be signed by the end of the week. He brought the revised proposal to Victoria the following Monday. She read it in front of him, all 12 pages. She didn't speak while she read. Marcus sat across from her and felt every second of the silence. When she finished, she set it down and looked at him. This is better. Better isn't good enough, Marcus said. Is it good? It's very good. And I'll tell you why. Because it doesn't read like a policy document. It reads like something written by someone who knows what's at stake. That's what was missing the first time. You were trying to sound like everyone else in this field. Stop doing that. Sound like you. Marcus took that in. One more thing, Victoria said. Yeah? The partner who turned you down last week. I heard you called him back. I did. James told me the man called him after your conversation and said, Where did you find this guy? Marcus didn't know what to say to that. Victoria leaned back in her chair. You don't need credentials to be credible, Marcus. You need conviction. And you have more of that than anyone I've ever hired. Marcus left her office and walked back to his desk. He sat down and looked at Ava's post-it note in the corner. Go, Daddy. He picked up his pen and went back to work. By the end of the second month, something had shifted. Not just in the department, but in Marcus. He walked differently. Not with arrogance, with certainty. The kind that comes from doing hard things and surviving them. The kind that comes from failing, adjusting, and getting back up before anyone notices you were down. He hired his first 2 staff members, a young woman named Priya, who had a master's in organizational psychology and more energy than Marcus could keep up with, and a retired HR director named Walt, who had 40 years of experience and a voice like gravel and honey. The 3 of them worked 12-hour days for 6 straight weeks building the framework. Marcus led. Not the way Tom Whitley led, with fear and control. Marcus led the way his father had built buildings, one brick at a time. Every piece placed with intention. Every person treated like they mattered, because they did. He called his mother every Sunday night. She always asked the same 3 questions. How's the job? How's Ava? Are you eating? The answers were always the same. Good. Great. Yes, Mama. But one Sunday night, she asked a different question. Marcus, are you happy? He thought about it for a long time. Longer than he expected. Not because the answer was complicated, because he hadn't been asked that question in so long that he had forgotten what it felt like to consider it. Yeah, Mama, I think I am. You think, or you know? Marcus looked across the kitchen table at the folder Victoria had given him. now buried under Ava's drawings and his own notes, and a coffee ring from his "World's Best Daddy" mug. He looked at the small cactus on the windowsill that he had brought from his old desk. He looked at the photo of Denise on the counter. "I know," he said. "I know I'm happy." His mother didn't say anything, but he could hear her smile. 3 weeks later, Marcus presented the completed ethical leadership framework to the Grant Foundation's board of directors. 12 people in a room, listening to him speak. The last time Marcus had stood in front of 12 people in a conference room, he had been soaking wet and begging for the chance to explain himself. This time was different. He spoke for 45 minutes. No notes, no slides. Just his voice and his conviction, and the framework he had built with Priya and Walt from the kitchen table at midnight foundation of his own experience. When he finished, the room was quiet. Then one of the board members, an older woman with silver hair and sharp eyes, leaned forward and said, "Mr. Reed, in 30 years of sitting on nonprofit boards, that is the most compelling case for culture reform I have ever heard." The room applauded. Marcus stood at the front of that boardroom and received something he had spent 5 years earning, and 2 days losing, and 3 months rebuilding. Respect. Not the kind that is given because of a title. The kind that is earned because of who you are when the room is empty and no one is watching, and the only thing guiding your hands is the knowledge that you are doing the right thing. Victoria caught his eye from the far end of the table. She didn't clap. She just nodded. Once. Slowly. The way someone nods when they see exactly what they expected to see. Marcus nodded back. After the meeting, he went to his office, closed the door, and called Mrs. Patterson. "They approved it," he said. "Every bit of it?" "Every bit." "Marcus Anthony Reed, I am going to bake you the biggest cake you have ever seen."
You don't have to do that, Mrs. Patterson.
"I'm not doing it for you. I'm doing it for me. I need an excuse to use my good pan." Marcus laughed. And then he sat in his office, in the quiet, and he let himself feel the full weight of where he was. Not just the job, not just the salary, not just the title, but the distance. The distance between the man in the parking lot holding a cardboard box in the rain and the man sitting in this office with a framework that was going to change how companies treated their people. That distance was not measured in miles or months. It was measured in decisions. Every single one of them made at a kitchen table or on the side of a highway or in the dark at midnight when no one was watching. Marcus reached into his desk drawer and pulled out a folded piece of paper. Ava's drawing, the one from his old cubicle. 2 stick figures, one big, one small, holding hands. "My dad helps people." He unfolded it carefully and taped it to the wall behind his desk, right where he could see it every time he turned around. Then Marcus picked up his pen, opened his laptop, and kept working. 6 months after Marcus Reed taped his daughter's drawing to the wall behind his desk, the Grant Foundation's ethical leadership program was no longer a proposal. It was no longer a framework on paper. It was alive. 14 companies across 3 states had signed on as pilot partners. 2 universities had requested permission to study the model. And a national business journal had called Catherine Powell 3 times in 1 week, asking for an interview with the man who built it. Marcus said no to the interview. 3 times. "You should do it," Victoria told him during their Monday morning meeting. "The visibility would be good for the foundation." "It's not about me," Marcus said. "It's about the work." Victoria studied him the way she often did, like she was looking for the seam where his humility became stubbornness. "Marcus, I respect that. I do. But at some point, you're going to have to accept that telling your story is part of the work. People need to see someone who looks like you, who came from where you came from, standing at the front of the room. That matters. Marcus didn't answer right away. He looked out the window. He could still see the highway from his office. He could always see the highway. "I'll think about it," he said. "That's all I'm asking." He thought about it for 2 weeks. Then he said yes. The interview was published on a Tuesday. Marcus didn't read it. Priya read it and told him it was incredible, like actually incredible. Walt read it and said, "They spelled your name right, so that's a win." Catherine Powell read it and cried at her desk, which she later denied. Ava didn't read it because she was 5. But she saw the magazine on the kitchen table and pointed at the photo.
"Gaddy, that's you.
"That's me."
You're in a magazine.
"I am."
Are you famous now?"
"No, baby. I'm just a guy who talked to somebody." Ava picked up the magazine and studied the photo. Marcus was standing in his office, arms crossed, Ava's drawing visible on the wall behind him. The headline read, "The Man Who Pulled Over: How One Act of Kindness Built a Movement."
"Gaddy, your drawing is in the picture."
"Your drawing, baby. You made it." Ava held the magazine against her chest.
"Can I take this to school?"
"Why?"
"Because Maya said her dad was on TV once, and I didn't have anything. Now I have something."
Marcus looked at his daughter, 5 years old, going on 35. "Yeah, Ava, you can take it to school." The article generated more attention than Marcus was prepared for. Within a month, the Grant Foundation received 47 inquiries from companies requesting access to the Ethical Leadership Program. Within 2 months, that number doubled. Victoria expanded Marcus's team from 3 to 8, and James Holloway, who had once questioned whether Marcus was qualified, walked into his office one afternoon and closed the door. "I owe you an apology," James said. Marcus leaned back in his chair. "For what?" "For doubting you. When Victoria first brought you in, I thought she was making an emotional decision. I thought she felt guilty about what happened to you and was trying to make it right with a job offer. I was wrong. You were protecting the foundation. That's your job." "Maybe, but I could have done it with more grace. The work you've done here, Marcus, it's real. It's changing how our partners operate. I've been in this field for 26 years, and I've never seen anything move this fast." Marcus looked at James for a long moment.
"I appreciate you saying that. It means a lot."
James stood up, extended his hand, and Marcus shook it. "One more thing," James said at the door.
"Yeah?"
"Victoria was right about you. She usually is. Drives me crazy." Marcus laughed, and James left. That evening, Marcus picked up Ava from school, and they drove home the long way, the way they sometimes did when neither of them was in a hurry. Ava was in the back seat, singing a song she had learned in music class. It was off-key and beautiful.
"Daddy, can we get ice cream?"
"It's 40 degrees outside."
"So?"
"So ice cream is for summer."
"That's not a rule."
"It's a dad rule." "Dad rules aren't real rules." Marcus caught her eye in the rearview mirror. She was grinning. She knew she was winning. "1 scoop," he said. 2 scoops. 1 scoop and you eat your dinner without complaining. Ava thought about it. Genuinely thought about it. Like a 5-year-old negotiating a business deal. "Deal." They stopped for ice cream. Ava got chocolate. Marcus got nothing, because 40 degrees was still 40 degrees. They sat in the car in the parking lot, and Ava ate her ice cream with the focus of a surgeon.
"Daddy?"
"Yeah?"
"My teacher asked us today what our parents do for work."
"What did you say?"
"I said my daddy helps people not get fired for being nice."
Marcus turned around in his seat and looked at her.
"That's what I said," Ava continued. "And Mrs. Williams said that was a very important job. And Maya said her dad sells insurance, and that's important too. But I think mine is more important. Don't tell Maya I said that.
Marcus didn't trust his voice for a second. He turned back around and stared through the windshield.
Daddy, are you okay?
I'm good, baby. I'm real good.
Then how come you're making that face?
What face?
The face you make when you're trying not to cry.
Marcus wiped his eyes with the back of his hand and laughed. Finish your ice cream, Ava.
See? You are crying. I'm not crying. It's cold in here. My eyes are watering. That's what crying is, Daddy.
He shook his head and started the car. You're too smart for me. You know that?
I know.
They drove home. Marcus made dinner. Ava ate it without complaining, as promised. After homework and bath time and a story about a bear who is afraid of the dark, Marcus tucked her in.
Daddy?
Yeah, baby?
I'm glad you stopped for that lady.
Marcus paused. They had never really talked about it directly. He had told her the broad strokes, the way you tell a child a complicated story by smoothing out the hard edges. But Ava was 5, not stupid. She had put the pieces together in her own way, in her own time. Why's that? He asked.
Because if you didn't stop, you'd still be at your old job. And you didn't like your old job. You never said that, but I could tell.
How could you tell? Because you never smiled when you came home from there. Now you smile. Marcus sat on the edge of her bed and pulled the blanket up to her chin. Ava, I need you to remember something. What I did on that highway wasn't special. It was just the right thing to do. And doing the right thing doesn't always feel good in the moment. Sometimes it costs you. Sometimes people punish you for it. But you do it anyway. You understand?
Because that's who we are.
That's right. That's who we are.
Like Grandpa.
Marcus felt the air leave his lungs. Yeah, baby. Like Grandpa. Ava closed her eyes.
Good night, Daddy.
Good night, baby girl. He turned off the light and stood in the hallway. He didn't press his back against the wall this time. He stood upright, both feet planted, and breathed. The seasons changed. Spring arrived. Ava turned 6 in April, and Marcus threw her a party in the apartment that Mrs. Patterson helped organize with a precision that would have impressed a 4-star general. There were balloons and cake, and 12 children from Ava's class running through the apartment like a small, beautiful hurricane. Victoria sent a gift, a handwritten card that said, "To the bravest girl I know, from the lady your dad helped on a rainy day." Inside the card was a savings bond in Ava's name. Marcus read the card and called Victoria that evening. "You didn't have to do that."
"I know. I wanted to."
"Victoria, that's too much." "Marcus, your daughter is the reason you pulled over that day. Not directly, but she's the reason you are who you are. Every good thing you've done, she's somewhere in the foundation of it. That savings bond isn't charity. It's an investment in the kind of person she's going to become." Marcus was quiet. "Accept it gracefully, Marcus." "Thank you, Victoria." "You're welcome. Now go enjoy the party. I can hear children screaming in the background." "That's just Ava's friend Maya. She screams at everything." Victoria laughed. It was the first time Marcus had heard her laugh like that. Not the boardroom laugh, the real one. In May, something happened that Marcus didn't expect. He received a letter. Not an email, a letter. Handwritten, on plain white paper, in an envelope with no return address. He opened it at his desk. It read, "Marcus, I don't know if you'll read this. I wouldn't blame you if you didn't. My name is Tom Whitley. I was your manager at Whitfield and Partners. I was the man who fired you. I'm writing this because I owe you something I can never fully repay, and that's an apology. What I did to you in that conference room was wrong. I knew it was wrong when I did it. I did it because I was afraid. Afraid that your being late would make me look bad. Afraid of losing my own position. Afraid of the people above me. I spent 15 years in that company managing by fear, because fear was the only tool I understood. Since I was terminated, I've had a lot of time to think. I lost my job. My wife left. My kids don't return my calls. And I've spent every day since wondering how I became the kind of man who fires someone for helping a pregnant woman on the side of the road. I don't expect your forgiveness. I'm not sure I deserve it. But I want you to know that what you did that morning, not just the tire, but the way you stood in that conference room and didn't lose your dignity, that changed something in me. I didn't see it then. I see it now. I heard about what you're building at the Grant Foundation. I heard about the Ethical Leadership Program. I read the article. And I want you to know that I'm starting over. I enrolled in a program for leadership development. Not the kind I used to run. The kind that teaches you how to be a human being first and a manager second. I'm not writing this to ask for anything. I'm writing this because you deserved to hear it. I'm sorry, Marcus, for all of it. Tom Whitley. Marcus read the letter twice. Then he folded it, put it back in the envelope, and placed it in his desk drawer. He sat in his chair for a long time. He didn't feel rage. He had expected rage, or at least the echo of it, but it wasn't there. He didn't feel satisfaction either. The man who had humiliated him in front of 12 people, who had erased 5 years of perfect work with 3 words, who had made Marcus pack a box in silence while no one said goodbye. That man had written him a letter on plain white paper and said, "I'm sorry." What Marcus felt was something more complicated, something that didn't have a clean word for it. It was the feeling of a circle closing. Not forgiveness exactly, but the willingness to let a door shut without slamming it. He didn't write back. Not that week. Not that month. But he didn't throw the letter away either. Summer came. Marcus took Ava to the beach for a week, just the two of them. They built sandcastles and ate too much fried shrimp, and Marcus fell asleep in a beach chair and got sunburned so badly that Ava took a photo of him and said she was going to show Mrs. Patterson. "Don't you dare." "Too late. Already sent it." "Ava, you don't even have a phone." "Mrs. Patterson taught me how to use your phone when you're sleeping." Marcus looked at his daughter. "Mrs. Patterson is a dangerous woman." "She said you'd say that." On the last evening of the trip, they sat on the beach and watched the sun go down. Ava was tired, the kind of tired that makes children quiet and philosophical. "Daddy, do you ever think about Mommy?" Marcus felt the question land in his chest like it always did, heavy and warm and aching. "Every day, baby." "What do you think she would say about your new job?" Marcus looked at the water. He thought about Denise, about the night she told him about being stranded in the summer heat, about what she said. The kind who thinks someone else will handle it. "I think she would say, it's about time." "About time for what?" "About time the world caught up to who you already are." Ava leaned against his arm. "That sounds like something Mommy would say." "It does, doesn't it?" They sat there until the sun disappeared. Then Marcus picked up his daughter, carried her to the car, and drove back to the hotel. In September, Marcus stood in front of 200 people at the Grant Foundation's annual gala. He was wearing a new suit, dark charcoal, well-fitted. Victoria had told him the old Navy blazer had served its purpose, but it was time. He didn't use notes. He didn't use slides. He stood at the podium and spoke from a place that most people spend their entire lives trying to find and never do. 8 months ago, I was on my knees in a parking lot, holding a cardboard box with 5 years of my life in it. I had just been fired for stopping to help someone, and I sat in my car and asked a question that I thought had no answer. I asked, "When did helping someone become something you get punished for?" He paused. I'm standing here tonight because one person decided that question deserved an answer. Victoria Grant didn't just give me a job. She gave me a mission. She said, "Build something that makes sure no one else gets punished for doing the right thing." And that is what we have built. He looked out at the room. 200 faces. Business leaders, community organizers, educators, donors. And in the third row, on the aisle, Mrs. Patterson, wearing her best church dress, sitting next to Ava, who was wearing a purple dress she had picked out herself and was kicking her legs back and forth because they didn't reach the floor. "But I need to be honest with you," Marcus continued. "I didn't build this alone. I built it with the help of people who believed in something bigger than profit margins and performance reviews. I built it with the memory of my wife, Denise, who taught me that you don't wait for someone else to handle it. I built it with the wisdom of my mother, who told me that read men, show up, and do the work. I built it with the faith of a 72-year-old woman named Mrs. Patterson, who brought me blueberry muffins on the morning I thought everything was over." Mrs. Patterson pressed a tissue to her face. Ava patted her arm. "And I built it with the love of a 5-year-old girl who once drew a picture of her daddy and wrote 4 words on it that I carry with me every single day." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out the drawing. He had laminated it. He held it up so the room could see. "My dad helps people." The room was silent. Not the kind of silence that Marcus had experienced in the Whitfield conference room, where no one spoke because no one had the courage. This was the other kind. The kind that means every person in the room is feeling the same thing at the same time. "That is the standard," Marcus said. "Not revenue targets, not quarterly projections, not how early you arrive or how late you stay. The standard is this. When you see someone who needs help, do you keep driving or do you pull over?" He looked at Victoria, who was sitting at the head table. She was pressing her hand against her belly. The baby was due in 3 weeks. She was looking at Marcus with an expression that was impossible to read and impossible to misunderstand at the same time. "I pulled over," Marcus said, "and it cost me everything. And then it gave me everything. Not because the universe was keeping score, not because karma has a ledger, but because character is a seed, and when you plant it in the right soil, it grows into something that is bigger than you, bigger than your job title, bigger than your paycheck, bigger than the worst day of your life." He paused one last time. "I am not a superhero. I'm not a saint. I'm a single father from a 2-bedroom apartment with a broken elevator. I'm a man who lost his wife and nearly lost his way. But I refuse to stop helping people, and I refuse to work in a world that punishes those who do." He folded the drawing, put it back in his pocket, and said, "Thank you." The room stood. Every single person. 200 people on their feet. The sound of their applause filled the room and kept going. It kept going long after Marcus stepped away from the podium. It kept going as he walked down the aisle. It kept going as Ava jumped out of her chair and ran toward him with her arms open. He picked her up. She wrapped her arms around his neck, the way she always did, too tight, like she was afraid he might float away.
"Daddy, everybody's clapping for you."
"They're clapping for us, baby."
"I like it."
"Me too." Mrs. Patterson reached over and squeezed his arm. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. Later that night, after the gala, after the handshakes and the conversations and the business cards, and the quiet moment when Victoria pressed his hand and said, Denise would be proud. Marcus drove home with Ava asleep in the back seat. He carried her upstairs. 4 flights. The elevator was finally fixed, but Marcus took the stairs anyway. Force of habit. Or maybe something else. Maybe he liked the climb. Maybe the climb was the point. He put Ava to bed. He pulled the blanket to her chin. He kissed her forehead. Then he walked to the kitchen and sat down at the table. The apartment was quiet. The kind of quiet that used to frighten him in the months after Denise died. The kind that made him feel like the walls were closing in. But it didn't feel that way anymore. Now it felt like space. Room to think. Room to breathe. Room to be the man he had fought to become. He pulled out his phone and opened the photos. He scrolled back to a picture from 6 months ago. A picture he didn't know Catherine Powell had taken. It showed Marcus on his first day at the Grant Foundation, standing in the doorway of his office, one hand on the doorframe, looking at his nameplate like he couldn't quite believe it was real. He looked at that photo for a long time. Then he scrolled forward, past photos of Ava at school, past photos of his team at work, past photos of the beach and the sunburn, and Mrs. Patterson's face when she saw the cake she had baked for Ava's birthday. Past all of it. All the way to tonight. To the gala. To a photo someone had taken of him at the podium, holding up Ava's drawing. 200 people on their feet. Marcus set the phone down. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the drawing one more time. He unfolded it and laid it flat on the table. 2 stick figures, one big, one small, holding hands. 4 words in shaky crayon. My dad helps people. He stared at that drawing until the apartment was completely still, until the city outside had gone quiet, until the only sound was the hum of the heater, the one that didn't rattle anymore because Marcus had finally gotten it fixed, and the soft breathing of his daughter in the next room. Then Marcus Reed folded the drawing, placed it back in his pocket, and turned off the light. He didn't need the light to know where he was. He was exactly where he was supposed to be. And that was enough. That was more than enough. That was everything. Because Marcus Reed was never the kind of man who waited for the world to tell him what he was worth. He already knew. He had always known. And now the world knew it too. Not because he chased power, not because he begged for recognition, not because the right person happened to see him at the right time, but because on a rainy morning, on a highway where every other car kept driving, one man pulled over. And that made all the difference.